Welcome back to The Explainer. Let's just jump right in. Today, we're stepping into a world defined by multi-million-dollar contracts, massive global brands, adoring fans, and, well, absolute, undeniable paranoia. Professional football. If you've ever, felt a little anxious about your own job security, let me assure you it is a complete illusion in the brutal world of football management. We're going to unpack the actual anatomy of a sacking. We'll look at the methods, the sheer madness, and the ruthless underlying math of managerial dismissals, drawing directly from some of the most infamous case studies in the sport's history. Let's get into it. I want you to take just a second and imagine the absolute most humiliating, public, or just bizarre way you could possibly lose your livelihood. You got it? Well, chances are, football has actually done it worse. The pure absurdity of this sport hits you right out of the gate when you look at how clubs actually deliver the ultimate bad news. There's no standard HR protocol here, guys. There is literally just the sudden drop of the axe. Which brings us to our first section, the most brutal sackings. So let's look at this rapid-fire history of just unhinged, disrespectful, and downright bizarre dismissals. The sheer volume of absurdity here is honestly staggering. Technology and impatience have been totally weaponized by ruthless owners over the years. Take Martin Jol at Tottenham Hotspur. The man was literally in the dugout, mid-game during a UEFA Cup tie, when a buddy texted him to say the news of his sacking had already leaked. Imagine finding out you're fired while actively doing your job on live television. No way, right? Then you've got Bruce Rioch at QPR, who found out via CFAX while sitting on his couch watching the news. Ruud Gullit at Chelsea? Sacked via teletext. And maybe the absolute most audacious one? Harald Schumacher at Fortuna Cologne. The chairman literally told him at halftime not to bother coming back out of the dressing room for the second half. Ouch. And this perfectly illustrates that the ruthlessness extends way beyond the pitch itself. Take the case of Arsenal legend Tony Adams during his stint managing Portsmouth. Now look, when a club is bumbling towards financial extinction, there is absolutely zero room for sentiment. We get that. But delivering the news that he was fired while he was literally in the middle of his 5-year-old son's birthday party? That is a uniquely cold move. Adams actually took it with surprising grace, but it just proves the point. Football waits for no one, not even a bouncy castle. Okay, let's pivot from the method of the sacking to the timeline of the sacked. I want you to lock this number in your brain for a minute. 44. This dramatic, repeating number is kind of going to serve as this eerie anchor for our deep dive into the history of one specific club, Leeds United. Section 2. Clough's 44 days at Leeds. So let's travel back to the summer of 1974 and walk through this disastrous timeline. Brian Clough's arrival at Elland Road was instantly complicated by a massive unforced error. On day one, right after signing the contract, instead of facing his slightly skeptical new squad, what does he do? He flies off to Majorca for a 9-day family holiday. So resentments are naturally already festering. Day 9, he finally shows up. By day 14, they suffer a catastrophic 3-0 opening day loss at Stoke. And then, by day 44, right after a League Cup draw against Huddersfield, who were, by the way, 2 divisions below them, Clough is out, sacked. So you're probably wondering, why did it implode that fast? Well, Clough famously poured petrol on the fire right from the jump by telling the players to throw all their past honors in the bin. Great icebreaker, right? But beyond his, let's call it, abrasive personality, there were severe structural problems. He inherited an aging squad that desperately needed a rebuild. The highly influential coach Les Cocker had just departed for the England national team. But the real kicker? His trusted assistant, his metaphorical handbrake, Peter Taylor, completely refused to follow him, choosing to stay at Brighton instead. You add in some immediate suspensions for key players like Billy Brumner and Kevin Keegan, and yeah, Clough was essentially doomed from the very start. Moving on to Section 3, History Repeats with Jock Stein. If you shift just 4 years forward to 1978, Leeds United are once again desperately looking to stabilize a deteriorating club, so they bring in Celtic legend Jock Stein. And honestly, you couldn't ask for a sharper contrast between two arrivals. Where Clough was arrogant, fiery, and instantly alienated the dressing room by trashing their past, Stein took a totally diplomatic approach to the exact same job. He was cordial. He praised the club's facilities. He openly said he wanted to continue the club's successful ways. Basically, he hit the nail on the head and made all the right noises to appease both the players and the board. And yet, here is the absolute ultimate punchline. Despite taking a completely opposite, super diplomatic approach to management, Jock Stein's tenure at Leeds United ended in the exact same number of days, 44. You can't make this stuff up. Now, the context here is wildly different, and it is absolutely crucial to clarify that. Clough was aggressively pushed out by a player revolt and a completely panicked boardroom. Stein, on the other hand, he was pulled away. Right around this time, Scotland manager Ali MacLeod had resigned. Stein was approached and interviewed by the Scottish FA. And man, the gravitational pull of managing your own national team is just too strong to resist. He wasn't pushed out, he jumped. But for Leeds United, the end result was exactly the same, starting from scratch again after just 44 days. Section 4, Sacking Mauricio Pochettino.
All right, let's bring this narrative out of the 1970s and into the modern, highly corporatized era. We really just have to look at Claudio Ranieri. The guy achieved the literal impossible, guiding Leicester City to a 1,000-to-1 Premier League title. It's widely considered one of the greatest sporting achievements in human history. 9 months later, sacked. The modern era of football is entirely defined by one single question. What have you done for me lately?
Which brings us straight to Spurs. Mauricio Pochettino built a phenomenal team over 5 years and actually took them to a Champions League final. Mere months later, he was fired. Just look at this classic boardroom speak from Spurs chairman Daniel Levy. He said, "Regrettably, domestic results have been extremely disappointing." It sounds reluctant, and hey, maybe it was. But the underlying ruthlessness of firing a beloved manager who fundamentally elevated the entire club's status, that just cannot be ignored.
But before we totally condemn the board here, let's look at the actual stats that forced their panic. In the 2019 season, Spurs had scraped together just 14 points from their first 12 matches. To put that into perspective, if you look at a larger sample size dating back to February, they had taken just 25 points from 24 games. That is literal, undeniable relegation-level form. And crucially, they were already 11 points off the pace for a top 4 finish. The trend lines weren't just dipping, they were completely broken.
And that leads us directly to the harsh reality of Premier League math. See, Spurs had just built a massive, state-of-the-art stadium, and that means one thing: massive billion-dollar debt repayments. To pay that kind of debt, regular Champions League football isn't just a nice-to-have bonus, it is an absolute financial necessity. Nostalgia and loyalty, they're entirely unaffordable when those are the stakes. So, Pochettino was out, and José Mourinho, a manager infamous for delivering immediate short-term results, was instantly hired to try and save the season's bottom line. Which brings us to the end of this explainer, and leaves us with this final, truly provocative question. Is any football manager ever truly safe? Whether you lose your job via a mid-game text message, whether you get ousted by a player revolt in 44 days, or whether you just fall victim to the billion-dollar math of a brand new stadium, the evidence is pretty overwhelming. In professional football, job security is a total myth. You are only ever a few bad weekends away from the axe. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you on the next one.